Well, here we are, another episode. What are we talking about today, Renee?
Hey, well, last time we got together, we chatted about the importance of workforce training in mental health. And today we thought we'd do a deeper dive into what are all the options because it can get overwhelming, not really knowing what you need or what's available or how do you connect to those folks. And sometimes you're wondering how much it costs, all those kind of things. So today we're going to give just a deeper dive into what are the trainings that are possible and giving people those skills because we know it's really critical to do it. So we're going to dive in and talk about, well, how do you figure it out? But before we do that, what is going on in the month of November as a farmer?
Well, luckily nothing, right? Everything's done. I mean, there's still a lot of cleanup to do, and I have no time to do it because I'm traveling for work the whole month of November. I'm out of state at least 1 or 2 days a week. So I shouldn't complain about work, should I?
No.
But it's kind of a lot of fun to do that as well. But when I think about all the stuff I'm leaving behind and not getting done, it can be a little stressful. So I'm trying to balance it all out.
So are we doing any fun locations? Because we may have some on the road
We
podcasts
we
coming up.
are. I'm
So
gonna guess
which,
coming up, we're gonna have some on the road podcasts. There was the Wisconsin Dells, there was
okay,
Milwaukee, there was
okay.
Annapolis, Maryland,
Wow.
Bowling
Bowling
Green,
Green.
Kentucky, I believe. So I think at least from one or two of those locations, I think I'll see you at one of them, I believe.
I believe I'll
Um,
see you in Kentucky.
and
So
maybe
you're
we'll do like a live, maybe we'll do like a Zoom and where I'm in one location, kind of like we do now, but I'll be somewhere. I don't know. We'll figure something out.
all right. So we're gonna have some on the road. So that's some things to look forward to, everybody. Some on the road episodes of who knows what from
And
where.
a lot of
I
great
like it.
conferences. And so I'm looking forward to learning a lot from different places around the
Yeah.
country.
And these are
Mar
new conferences,
New
right? So it's
conferences,
gonna be cool to see
Maryland Rural
what's
Health, I'm going to drop in
yeah
on and kind of see what rural health looks like in
on the East
Maryland, which
Coast.
should be interesting. We'll be up north. So I'm excited to kind of get out and about and kind
Yeah.
of reconnect with some folks.
It's gonna be cool to see if the themes are changing too as you go
Yeah.
around the country and maybe there'll be new themes coming out. I know we've talked about that on our podcast some about what's going on around the country in the rural mental health space. And so it'll be cool to have more conversations and
Well,
talk
and
about what's
some of these
happening.
are more corporate related, right? So,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
when I'm in Milwaukee, that's actually the American Bankers Association. And so we're going to be
Oh,
talking a lot more about what we're talking about here today, right?
yep.
Is talking about what is mental health awareness training in the workplace and how do I choose which one to do, right? Because
Yep.
that affects everyone. And so we're seeing a lot more interest from corporations and from national associations about how can they better educate their membership, not only for employees benefit, but for their customers benefit, because some of these customers, are high risk. And so when I'm speaking to American Bankers Association, it's specific to agricultural bankers,
Hmm.
and those bankers working in the farm sector. And we know in ag-related sectors, suicide rates are higher, stress is really high. It's been a rough year. Prices were exorbitantly low. Congress hasn't passed the next farm bill. So farmers are stressed, ranchers are stressed. We've got a lot of negative pressures economically. So all of those things, see, I could go on a farmer. There's the farmer in me coming out. So, all of those things interrelate. And so I think that's why this conversation is so important today.
Well, yeah. And when you got groups like the Bankers Association realizing the billions and billions of dollars lost in the industry, they're really good partners in our state as well.
Mhm.
Thinking about the bankers groups and the workforce development groups, all of them are realizing the loss of workforce when they don't have that training. So I think to kick this off, the most important thing for you to think about out there, if you're thinking about training in your workplace, is you need to do it, one, and you need to pick something. Today we're going to talk about lots and lots of choices, but you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can pick one to start the conversation and then grow from there. So as we're talking through all of these today, if something piques your interest, reach out to us. We can get you more information, get you connected with a good trainer. That's the other piece. We've talked about this last time. They've got to be good at training because I have some training in my office, Jason, that they're like, well, we need to talk about vicarious trauma or whatever. And they're like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, please don't bring in so and so. Can I be gone that day if they come to train? Oh my goodness. Well, that's terrible. So we don't want that either. So we're bringing in different trainers. You came in and helped us out a couple of times
Yep.
because, like, can't have bad trainers because then you miss the whole point of the entire situation. So you're talking about yes, get training, get good trainers, reach out to us if you don't know who. But to kick us off today, acronym soup. It's your favorite, one of your
I
favorite topics. So let's
Oh,
talk about it.
I love acronyms, and that's going to be part of the challenge as we start talking about these, right? So, what we're going to talk about today are fidelity and evidence-based trainings, right? There's lots of trainings out there, and so you can always start with your EAP, right, or your EAP or a local resource, and generally they'll have a catalog of trainings. I've talked before. I do work for different EAP companies, and some of my trainings are listed in their catalogs, and so you can look at those catalogs. You can look at what the learning objectives are. And generally, those are shorter, quick hit, lunch and learn type things. But that's a good place to start, right? But then there's trainings that I like to kind of set up it on pedestal, right? They're evidence based, they're fidelity. It's going to be the same thing. It should be the same thing no matter who delivers it, right? And so, as an HR director, I like to think about things. I get a certificate at the end of the day, and I have a standard I can hold all of my employees to, right? And so, that kind of the number one up there is MHFA, which is mental health first aid. I'm going to do the acronym for each one, Renee. This is going to be
I
great, right?
cannot wait. I
And
cannot
so
wait.
there's mental health first aid, there's youth mental health first aid, there's specific designations of rural, higher education, public safety, first responders. There's so many varieties now of mental health first aid, and you can really tailor that to your unique situation, to the population that you serve, to your employee population. It's just really the gold standard when I think about a way to engage employees, to really address stigma, and to teach some skills of how do I reach out, how do I connect, and how do I talk to someone that I'm worried about. And it aligns with best practices and probably the guidelines and your policies and procedures within your company. And it does a great job of intertwining all of those things together.
What I really like
The,
about mental health first aid, I've taken that one, and what I really appreciated about it, it really is like first aid, more like a first aid CPR type idea. And so you think about those classes, and I had been a lifeguard from 20 something years of my life when I started out, because my goal was never to work fast food. So to never work fast food, I needed a different way of having employment when I was in my high school years and into college, so I wouldn't have to do fast food. So to do that, I was a lifeguard, and so I had to have first aid and CPR every year. Well, this is very similar to that. And I appreciate the way it's structured that way because it talks about it from a first aid perspective of what would you do. And if anybody's ever done first aid and you know that you're like surveying the scene, you're trying to see what's going on out there and then how do you point people in the right direction to get help, and then goes through like what are you looking for and how do you do that? It's the same thing with mental health. Like you're kind of looking at trying to figure out what do you do and then those conversations. I took this class with a group of professors at our local community college, and some of us were from the psych department, so knew a little bit more, and some of us were front desk folks in other places. Some of us were other professors in other departments, and it was really 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 good to help them understand because there was a great referral network to get people help at that university, but a lot of people didn't know what it was
right.
and didn't utilize it. And so they weren't getting people connected to those proper services. And so mental health first aid was a really great way to help them see, again, to what you were saying about your employee assistance program, programs that you already have available to you that you're just not using. So it kind of isn't, some people think, well, I don't want to train on something because then I have to pay more money to do more things. Not usually. Usually it is training so that you use what you're already paying for. And so it's in
Mhm.
your employee assistance programs or your other resources that's already at your fingertips. And so that's what I appreciate about that. So the next one, Jason, on the list is QPR. What is
And
QPR?
question, persuade, refer. And so this is more of a quick hit training, hour and a half. And basically it kind of goes through, it's kind of a mini version of mental health first aid. We didn't say, but mental health first aid is a full day, right? It's a 7.5 hour training. So it's a regular workday training where QPR is kind of a shortened version. And so it doesn't really go through the skills necessarily, but it helps you to identify, notice, and say something to someone who may be experiencing suicidal ideation or having suicidal thoughts. Next on the list is Notice, Talk, Act. That's a newer one to the list,
Okay.
and that's
Yeah.
not one I know a lot about. I'm going to be learning more about it here shortly. I'm going to a training of Notice, Talk, Act so that I can go deliver that. There's workplace versions, there's
Mm.
educational versions for schools, and I think it's very similar to QPR. But I'm still doing research and vetting out some of these programs myself. Do you know what ASSIST stands for, Renee?
I don't.
applied suicide intervention skills training. And so that one's more for first responders, firefighters, law enforcement. So it gets a bit more in depth. So it's a little bit more clinical. And so that would be more for that segment of employees
Okay.
when we think about it. But, there's different variations of all of these. And so it's important to think about that. ACE is Ask, Care, and Escort. That's a suicide prevention program designed for the military that actually came out of the Army. And so that's a program
Hmm.
specifically used in the Army. And so there's a lot of really good data out there around ACE. PFA, Renee, we've both been through psychological first aid.
We
And
have.
so that would be support after disaster, which is also something that a lot of employers do a lot of work in disaster preparedness. Emotional first aid and all of these things we're talking about are very important in supporting someone after a traumatic event, a natural disaster. And so it's also important to think about these things should be interwoven into your policies and your trainings around disaster preparation. And so again, how are you going to support your employees through those types of situations? And I don't think we mentioned NAMI Provider, but we're going to have a link when we talk about data of SAMHSA has a really great mental health awareness training one pager that they do. And they really focus on mental health first aid QPR through a lot of that document because there's more research on those two programs than some of the other ones. But NAMI Provider is also something that we've both been involved with, Renee, and that is a fantastic training that happens generally to caregivers, folks
Hmm.
in healthcare, hospitals. I've done a lot of training around medical providers and in state institutions using the program NAMI Provider, and that's from NAMI National. That's really a program about how addressing stigma and helping those caregivers for individuals with serious mental illness to better understand family perspective and patient perspective.
Yeah, what I really like about NAMI Provider, we've talked about this before, but it's a three-member team. You have a provider on the panel that either is a person with a mental illness or has family with a mental illness. Then you have a family member that has dealt with this or a person in recovery. And what's really great about it is there's a lot of stories in there talking about like how different steps along the way have impacted them, whether they've gotten the help they needed or didn't. Talks through challenges of things like medication. A lot of times people will get frustrated that why don't you just take your medication? And then there's 1,000 reasons why sometimes that doesn't work and why medications aren't useful. And so it's a really good tool just to kind of level set and give people again the language. So especially like when you're working in your institutions, they're available in some of the correctional settings. I know DMU, the Des Moines University, they're doctors of osteopathy third-year students
Mhm.
all go through this program, and it's a full 2-day program. There's a 2-day version, and then there's a shorter 4-hour version. And the doctors of osteopathy now are being trained so that they have a better understanding of people that come to their office, whether it's family members or their clients that have different types of mental health issues and how to help them because everybody in life interacts with and have
Mhm.
relationships with people that are suffering with either substance use disorders or mental health issues, and they're going to be impactful in your life. So even you think of people that work in the service industry, they're going to see people day in, day out that are struggling and need to know what to do, how to be supportive, how does that impact them, words that they can say that makes it better, words that you say that make it worse. And so NAMI Provider is an evidence-based program, like you said, that's a really great one. And one that we've both trained in. I'm the state trainer for that
Mhm.
particular program and can train people that want to be able to do this training themselves. And so it's a really, really good one. So when you're thinking about other things, Jason, are there others that we're talking about? Like what other issues are we looking at here as far as who are these trainings targeted for? You mentioned some are specific military, some came out of the Army, but who would be the right people to take some of these trainings?
Well, absolutely, and that's kind of why we're going through the list, and it is acronym soup, right? That, some of these are tailored for the general population, like mental health first aid, QPR, Notice Talk Act, right? Those are, generally done in workplaces. NAMI provider is generally for those individuals who are patient facing, right? Delivering healthcare services of some site in more of a hospital or institution setting or delivering care in some way. So it's a little more tailored toward that. Psychological first aid is a lot geared toward first responders and those folks responding after a traumatic event. Sometimes that's workplaces, if they have disaster responsiveness plans and they have to continue through flooding events or other types of things. So depending on the type of workplace you have really depends on what types of trainings. And we really didn't touch upon, but it really gets acronym soup. We start talking about some of the clinical tools that are available for clinicians and healthcare professionals, like safety or is path warm. Is path warm stands for something, Renee. I've been
Wow.
through an is path warm training, and I can tell you, I still have to look at what is path warm. What does it stand for?
Wow. I don't know. What does it stand for?
Ideation, substance use, purposelessness, anxiety, trapped, hopeless, withdraw, anger, reckless, mood change, which are all indicators of suicide. And so
Yeah, I'm going to go back to our soapbox on acronym soup. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I
Is
put
this
this
one
list
like,
partly together just for you,
I appreciate that
because
so
I
much.
know.
So this last one, is it more like where you're trying to think of like a mnemonic so that you remember all the different words in the list? Is that what you're shooting for? Or
I
they
mean,
actually created a training that does
there's
this?
actually a training that goes through, and then you use is
Oh
path
boy.
warm as part of your documentation. I think the intent is good. That's
Yeah.
much more aimed at clinicians and clinical purposes.
Yeah.
However, just note
However,
there's lots of trainings out there, and they're
yes.
designed for different populations. They're designed for different professions, and some morph themselves into other areas. And so it can be overwhelming if you're the
Yeah.
one deciding on the training of which training do I pick? And then I think you said it earlier, picking the right facilitator that can deliver it to your organization.
Right. So when you're thinking about like which one to pick, some of the things are, things you have to consider if you're a management, because I have budgets, I understand. I have a very interesting thing in the government on how I can choose trainers.
Mhm.
I need to have targeted small business. It needs to be below a certain amount of money, or then I have to bid it and all these different things. And so different places have different rules on how you do it. So when you're thinking about how to pick it, you have to think about like, the number of hours involved. And so, like a mental health first aid class is going to be a full work day. And then, if you have staff that are essential, do you have to do that so that you stagger that more than once so that different people can take it in shifts so that the work still gets done, right? And then there's cost to them not working that day, and you're going to pay them to attend. So you have to think about like that, how much it's going to cost, what type of number of hours are required, who the facilitator could be, those kinds of things. So it's not a challenge of doing it. And so the good parts are if you pick something from this list, they're all evidence-based, they're all shown to be effective, and they've got really good outcomes. And so you can know that because you chose one of these, you're going to get your money's worth. The trick is then deciding, how much time and energy can you put into it. And so you might pick one that's a shorter one, like a QPR, that's an over the lunch hour type of thing to begin the discussion. And then if you've got enough interest and ongoing conversation, then you might do the full mental health first aid. Or you may know that just off the top, I know Jason's got a story. Wasn't it a community that just recently called you and they had an incident and they're like, we need the whole day training because of such and such incident had
Yep.
occurred? And that's
Yep.
pretty common for you. You may get a call like that something's happened. And so they
Well,
need
it
the whole
was
day.
it was actually an employee related issue. An employee had an incident with someone who struggled with serious mental illness. And so as a result of that incident, they wanted to train their entire workforce because it
Right.
actually became a liability insurance issue.
Right.
So frequently I get called to come in and do a training as a response to an issue, which I prefer not to. I prefer to be preventative and say, we'll help you put together a training plan that
Right.
spans multi-years, because to think we can just go in and do it right off the bat, it's not a one and done. It said we're
No.
going to train 10% of your staff this year, 10% of your staff next year. That's built into the budget in subsequent years. And let's have a plan for how are we going to start to train folks, right, over the long haul, so that the goal is everyone gets the same thing. And I get it. You can't do all that up front sometimes. The cost is prohibitive when you think about pulling people off the floor or wherever they work to do a 8-hour training. It costs a lot when you have 30 people in a room for 8 hours. I get it. It's not about the facilitator, it's not about the materials, it's not about the space cost. It's really about the employee, the
Right,
cost to train those employees. But you can do that in a way where you spread the cost out over 3 to 5 years, as long as you follow that plan and you have
right,
a plan and you're impacting this not just in the training, but you're also impacting it in your supervisory training. You're also impacting it in how you're leveraging your EAP resources and the training that's available there in your overall training plan, your organization. And I think that's where I see so much reaction, so
mhm,
much reactionary. You know what? We're gonna do this because something happened, and then it's one and done. It gets done, but then there's no follow through.
right,
And so then guess what? Those places are right back to where we were next year, and then
right.
they're going to pay more again to set everyone in a room. And unfortunately, that's the cycle I see happen over and over again in a lot of places.
Right. And the other thing you have to consider is turnover. So, like, even in my
Right.
small office, we're going to have three turned over within a year. And so, the training that we've started along that journey, we still need to freshen people up that maybe new, that didn't get the original training, add them to the group so that they're caught up to speed, or that, that they have the opportunities as well. So, you also have to think about those new employees that are going to come on later to the shift. Because if you've got folks that are speaking the same language, so congratulations, you've done some of this training and you're now all speaking the same language, your new hires are going to need to have an opportunity to catch up, or everybody's going to be on the same language except them, and they're going to be left out. So if you do it over time, like you're saying, you can have encapsulate those new folks too, so that as you're going over that 3 to 5 year plan, your new folks are getting molded in and ongoing training. Because we've done the same thing. There was apparently a really big 2 day training in our office a couple of years ago, but nobody decided to write it down or to make it a standard operating
Right.
procedure. And so when I got there, I never even knew it existed until like I was 6 months in, and somebody said, "What about that 2 day training we did?" And I'm like, "What's the 2 day training?" And so it never got operationalized so that it
Right.
occurred again. And so lots of people are new and different since then. And we didn't even think, I'm like, what were the agenda topics to train on? Maybe we should probably do them again, but it wasn't, it was set up a one and done. And it wasn't, to your point, it wasn't set up to continue training or whatever. So we're at a
Right.
loss of like, wait, who was in that training? What was the training? And then do we need to do it again? And so, yeah, you just have to, it was
I
just that second step
right.
of operationalizing it and making it part of your every year activity.
And an honest conversation that we're more than willing to have with folks is a lot of times employers want to train their own people to
Yeah.
be train the trainers. And there's benefits to
Yeah.
that and there's negatives to that. And so
Hmm.
I'll be real honest, you have to be a pretty big size and have a really sophisticated plan and have a lot of support if you want that to be successful. I've seen it be unsuccessful more than I've seen it be successful because
Yeah, me
they
too.
train folks who were chosen to be trained, not because they were good trainers, but just because they were chosen. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times that loses steam very quickly. And so it's I hate to say this, but it's rare that I see training programs that are able to sustain past 3 to 5 years, which would be the break even point. When we think about bringing a consultant in who can deliver that, most of the time the trainings, if someone doesn't do it regularly, isn't going to be to the fidelity and the standards they need to be
Right.
to. A
Right.
lot of times those folks leave and then they don't have the dollars to go back and retrain someone because it's very expensive for some of these programs to get trained to be able
Right.
to train those within your organization. So, I'm always willing to do a cost value analysis and kind of go through what's the benefit over the long haul of bringing a consultant like Renee and I in to do those trainings, and what would be the offset of then how many would you have to do to train your own employee or two employees to do those trainings, and does that save you money because you're taking them away from other work? So
Yeah.
I do think it's an important conversation to have. It's tough. It's really
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, I find it kind of fun, but they were trying to do some train the trainer stuff with some of our incarcerated individuals and having some of them be the trainers. Well, the goal is that they're going to get out eventually. So
Right.
then you're left without the trainer. And so,
Right.
to your point, and with today's market and today's number of workforce, people don't stay like they used to. It's one
No.
thing that you used to have a training department and they were there 20 years and they were the corporate trainers, but that's
Mhm.
just not really a lot of how the market is looking today. And so people aren't at the same employment location for that time. So like you said, through those 3 to 5 years, there could have been an update in the program itself so that you need to go
Yeah.
back and get retrained. The person could have moved on. All those different things can happen in 3 to 5 years, and then you're left without a trainer and you're back to square one. So you just have to be thoughtful about
Well,
what it is you're trying to do.
and I know a network of folks across the Midwest who are fantastic trainers that have specific niches that can go in and do these things. And they're going to give you a much better product than some of the employees I see being trained. And so, I see the value proposition. And, if you want to make an impact at your work, sometimes having that education come from a third party, an outsider, carries so much more credibility, right? It's kind of like a
Yeah.
parent talking to your kids, right? Like my kid doesn't listen to me, but if someone else says it, it may be the smartest thing they've ever heard in the world. And
Yeah,
so let's
I've had that.
harness that.
I've had that with you in my own office. I brought you in and you said the same stuff I've said 100
I
times.
know.
They're like, Jason is brilliant.
Well,
I'm like, shut up. No, I'm
yeah,
just
that's
kidding.
exactly right.
I was supportive, but I was like, I've already said that 100 times. But
Well,
anyway, it is
I
true.
say it better. I say it better, Renee. Let's just be honest
Apparently
about that.
so. So
Yeah,
it's pretty fun. So I know but that's important as a different voice. And then sometimes they realize that I actually know what I'm talking about because the expert came in and said what
right,
I've already talked about. So then
right.
they're like, wait, she
Absolutely.
does know what she's talking about. So I'm like, okay, however it needs to happen. Well, this week, the recovering politician self-care policy of the week, Friday night football. I have told you what, my Friday nights in the fall now, this we're into November, has been my favorite. By the end of my week, I don't want to think anymore. I don't want to talk so much. I don't want to process. My brain is pretty overloaded with all the decisions I had to make during the week. And I have found that that's a nice just alternative to I can go out with Brent, I can go hang out, but I don't have to like really talk and it's like totally different than the rest of my life of what I'm doing. So my brain just gets a nice refresh and I've just picked an activity. So I don't think it has to be football for people, but it's like, what do you do at the end of your week to kind of celebrate your week, to close down work for the week and to really start kind of your weekend and thinking about like, what can that be for you? And I think that that's really important. So for us, it's kind of this routine, grab something or get some popcorn at the game and just do something to kind of the week's done, close out the work week, move on for the weekend, and just kind of a nice break because it gives my brain like a brain break. I'm not thinking about work if I'm thinking about football. And I've had a really great time. We watched really great games. We go to all like some of the top most competitive games of the week. We always pick and end up at all kinds of high schools, supporting all kinds of sports programs around the state. We don't have any specific favorites. So we just go to all kinds and give them our money and they take it. So it's been really fun. So I find that's been good for us. So Jason, do you have any kind of rituals at the end of your work week? I mean, I know for you during harvest, it sort of rolled right into farming. So you didn't really have end of weeks, but now that you're kind of getting out of that, do you have things that are like kind of close down my week to kick off my weekend?
I don't know. We're having to create new ones since, my kids are kind of on
Yeah.
their own and out.
Yeah.
So we're creating new things.
That's
So I
yeah.
think I'm in a transitional point of my life where we're
Yeah.
figuring out what are those things that we can do now. I know that
Yeah.
we go out to eat a little bit more than we used to because the two of us can just meet after work and do that. So it's just different as you go through those different phases of life. So I think
Yeah.
I'm sorting out my new routine still, Renee.
Yeah. Well, it was just the two of you. You guys can end up splitting meals too, and it's like really, you can end up doing
No, we
things that
can't agree. We can't agree on anything. So that's not the case at
oh,
all.
too bad. Because that's like
Yeah,
sometimes for us we can
yeah,
like split things, or we've even done
yeah,
like kind of hopping where we're like we'll go over here
yeah,
and have an appetizer, and then we'll go to the
yes,
next place or kind of thing. But you
right,
don't have to carry your kids along with, so it's
right,
kind of fun.
right.
Well, this week we talked about a whole lot of acronym soup, but hopefully we helped explain them all. We'll put them in the show notes for you so you know what we're talking about. But there's just tons and tons of evidence-based programming that can really help in your workplace talking about mental health and giving you a common language and some really good tools to start if you want to know about training. We'll have some links in here that you can find out more information. But if you really have questions about like what training, what you think would be good for us, just reach out to us. We've done tons of training and we can get you pointed in the right direction. If it's not us, we like we said, we know a good network of people that are going to be high quality that can come and do this for you. So just reach out because we want to make sure that your folks get all the training that they need. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.